Welcome to a new episode of the SAP vlog. My name is Sadi, PhD candidate at WHU Otto Beisheim School of Management in Germany. Today I'm speaking with Fannie Couture, assistant professor at Montréal, about her 2023 AMJ article with Paula Jarzabkowski and Jane Lee called Triggers, Traps, and Disconnect: How Governance Obstacles Hinder Progress on Grand Challenges. Fannie, thanks for taking the time.
Thanks for having me.
So the case that you illustrate in this paper is set in the Great Barrier Reef region. In 2008, a flooded coal mine discharged contaminated water into a river, and in response, a cross-sector partnership with around 25 organizations formed to address water degradation. Now, you began your PhD about 10 years after that.
Mm-hmm.
How did you first become aware of this setting, and what drew you to it?
That's a really good question. So I was shopping for basically a case. So I was interested in different ways of strategizing in pluralistic and complex contexts, ideally around environmental issues. So I was exploring the mining sector and seeing how they negotiate free, prior, and informed consent. I was approaching mining trade associations as well to see if I could have an entry there. Nothing really panned out. So I ended up freaking out, being like, oh my God, I need to find a case. How am I going to do this? So I reached out to a really good mentor of mine who's Charlotte Cloutier here at HEC. And we were working prior to this with some partners in the mining industry. And so she reached out to them and they said, well, how about you guys look at this initiative that's really cool. It's in the Great Barrier Reef region, and they're doing really something innovative that we don't see a lot. Perhaps they would be keen to have, doctoral student come and study their initiative. So that's how I came to know about it. It was very serendipitous and just me expressing despair to my mentor and being like, please help me. I don't know where to go. Yeah. So
Yeah,
it's not romantic. It's just realist, that's how it happened.
yeah, and the other not romantic part of it is that it also took, after you started it, working on it, it took a couple of years until it was finally published in 2023.
Yep.
But do you remember when you initially entered the field, what your thoughts were on what was actually happening there, and how did this, like from this original idea, become like the paper that we have seen published over time?
Yeah. Yeah. So I wasn't I was definitely not doing like the purest form of grounded theory. I had some informed theories in mind when I approached the partnership. And one of the reasons for that is that I went to a PROS conference just before I entered the field. And for those of you who've been to PROS before, they always have these amazing keynote speakers that come from different fields and are just like blowing our brains out about different perspectives. And when I was there, there was Wendy Espeland who presented a piece on commensuration, and I was just so passionately keen to explore that literature. And because the partnership was, focusing a lot on a report card, for me, it was a case of commensuration, and that was going to be my thesis. And even my supervisors were like, your thesis is going to be on commensuration. So I had this very keen interest in understanding the commensurative practices. So just for those of you who are not familiar with it, commensuration is this idea of ranking, of quantifying something that is qualitative in nature. So for instance, in this case, we're talking about water health degradation, and we're trying to put a grade on it. We're trying to report on it through this process of simplification through rankings and ratings. So that was my initial hunch, if you will, entering the field. Yeah.
But then it became something entirely different. And I mean,
Yep.
not entirely different. You can probably read about it in between the lines. But I
Yep.
mean, what struck me particularly when I read the article, that even though it is a strategy paper, in some regard, because it is about collective action, which is inherently strategy. You don't foreground strategy particularly, but you frame multi-stakeholder governance in such a way that it can connect to all these strategic issues.
Yep.
So I was interested in what was most challenging, but maybe more interestingly, most insightful about like your journey to arriving to this particular theoretical framing.
That's a great question. So the most challenging, I was really keen to look at the outcome of that process as much as the process itself. And that, in many papers, are two very distinct onto-epistemological positionings, right? So you have the outcome and then the process, and they don't really speak to each other. But our paper, and that was very challenging to articulate and to evidence and to showcase in a way that was respectful of our posture. We're process and practice scholars, but also showing that we can go further in that theorizing and actually evidence how that unfolds in a way that creates a disconnect between the aim of the partnership and how they try to reach that aim. So that was the most challenging for me, was really to have that conversation with reviewers, get them on board, explain to them how we want to get there. And for me, that's the power of a practice and process paper, is when we can look at action, response, and outcome. So really theorizing those arrows, like Jen Howard Grenville used to say. So really trying to look at those linkages in time. So very, very challenging. And the most insightful for me is the model, the V-shaped model at the end. So it's really tied to the challenge. I remember very distinctly, I was in the financial district sector in London, having a conversation with Paula, and just, when you're just gibbering around something and it's something that's very important, and eventually I just drew in my note that V shape and it just clicked in my mind. I was like, oh my God, I got it. This is it. This is what this is. So this one is romantic. The first one isn't, but this one is very, Hollywood-esque. Like, it's, wow, okay, I got something. And that's very rare. Like, usually, like, that was probably the, I don't know, 50th iteration of a model that I had by this time. And then there were 100 more after that. But at that moment, for me, the insight was locked in. And that was going to be it, so yeah.
I mean, I was looking at a video that was recorded in 2021 where you presented one of those iterations,
Yeah.
probably. But I think you also already submitted the version of the paper to AMJ at that time. And you kind of talked about disagreements in the grand challenges literature about divergent views that enable or hinder progress. And I mean, it's still within your paper. It's not gone, but it's not the main framing anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was curious because I think a lot of scholars who have not so much experience with these review processes, I'm curious like how this review process like reshaped your theorizing and what you learned through this process on how to publish strategy as practice research more broadly.
Yeah. So there's been lots of iteration. The first version was on legitimacy. The second one was a naive attempt by myself to problematize the literature. So I was really, everybody read the Alvesson case on problematizing versus gap spotting. And I was like, okay, I'm going to have a go at this and problematize the literature. And the reviewers were like, no, this doesn't work. Like, because the problem with that kind of problematization is that the reader would expect me to come with a solution and to say, this is how you should organize collectively. And that wasn't our story. That wasn't what we were doing. So it was like there was a big mismatch between the two. And they were super nice. Like the reviewers were like, we get it. We see what you're trying to do, but this isn't working. It doesn't fit your research design. It doesn't fit what you're trying to do. So dig a little deeper. And the legitimacy one was tricky because we were legitimating practices within a partnership. But in any legitimacy story, because legitimacy by its own definition, if you look at Suckman's definition, it's really that kind of social judgment from people outside. So you need that dyadic relationship in your findings, right? So you need to show here's what they're doing to try to legitimatize themselves, and here's how it's getting received on the other end, and how that kind of interacts with one another. So that we didn't have that bit, right? So I had some data on the community side, but it was nowhere near as rich as what I had within the walls of the partnership. So that was also something that I reluctantly gave up. I was like, okay, I mean, it was cool, I liked it, but it's not it. And even before that, the commensuration piece for me, I was very much keen to explore the sociomateriality aspect of this partnership. And the reviewers kept telling me, no, it's more than that. It's more than that. There's some dynamics within that partnership that you need to explore. You can't just box it in terms of the report card. So I also set that aside. And by, through that back and forth, eventually, and it sounds so easy in a one sentence thing, but it was excruciatingly hard. I moved into, okay, let's look at this partnership itself. What are the operational rules? What's the strategy plan? How do they function? What are the agreements? How did it evolve over time? And that's when I landed with governance. And that fit, that it was a good fit to explore it in a more holistic way. Instead of just focusing on one dynamic, we had a broader picture of what was going on in the partnership. So yeah, just lots of back and forth, lots of learning on my part on how to problematize, how to frame the contribution as well. And yeah, I was a doctoral student, so everything was very new. I was very lucky to have Jane and Paula to help me along the way. Yeah, so that's it.
Yeah, I mean, these are probably like broadly all the experiences that
Yeah.
you can have in how to approach a work like that. You have an idea in mind, or then you try to problematize a literature, and then you try a certain type of framing. It doesn't work, and in the end, you luckily succeeded. But having all these different experiences, like looking forward on how you approach your current research now, are there any tips for young scholars on how you, with these experiences in mind, approach topics like theoretical framing or theorizing or something like that?
Uh, it's very hard to give tips, but I think I was the one thing that kept me confident and moving forward was the richness of the data. So for me, just getting the good data, having the solid foundations upon which you can build, a finding that's going to be solid for me it was really the melody. And then, like I was saying before, it's the melody, and then you put words on it through the theoretical framing, but you need to have that melody rock solid. It needs to be really good. So like funnily enough, throughout all those reshaping of the theoretical framing, the findings section didn't really change that much. It did, but the words changed, the way we moved it. But ultimately, the melody was always the same. What we wanted to say, that V-shaped thing, was always there. And I think that really gave me the confidence to play around with the theoretical framing a bit more. If I hadn't had that, I would have been probably a bit more anxious to move from one. But because I had this rich ethnography, I knew that I could speak and have conversations with different research streams and potentially produce something that could be interesting in many different ways. So maybe that's a tip. I don't know. And just have fun. Honestly, I just had fun. Man, I did so many literature reviews on different things, means ends decoupling, path dependence, escalating commitments, and everything. And I think what you said is very true. The journey in itself is you have to have fun. So it's formative, and it's really helpful to help, to build that picture around, okay, what's out there and how can this phenomenon help me to elaborate those theories in different ways. So, yeah.
Thank you, Fanny. Thank you so much. I mean, we spoke about our conversation beforehand, before recording, and there you mentioned this melody, and that you have it from this Beatles documentary. I think
Yeah.
we can put the reference into our notes somewhere so people can watch the documentary as well. And if people are curious how well-intentioned collaboration can end up stalling progress on grand challenges, I recommend that you don't miss part 2 of our conversation, Fanny and I, where we unpack the empirical story a little bit in more detail. Thank you so much, Fanny.
Thank you.